Why is digital so important? Well, digital refers to business models with technology at their core. And we've all come through, I don't know, what are we, 10 years into digital transformation now? And I think it's fair to say that many digital transformation efforts have failed. They weren't appropriate in terms of the scope. They weren't appropriate in terms of the number of people that were involved. They tended to result in this piece we call the digital illusion. The digital illusion means you built a really great mobile app for your employees to use, or a really great mobile app for your customers to use, but everything behind the scenes was still manual. And that's not really true digital transformation. This is where we saw low code, no code, and digital process automation really gaining traction about 5 years ago, because they have the promise of being able to take that long tail of everything we do, that stuff that's expressed in paper and spreadsheets today, and make it a true expression of the business inside of a managed platform, making everything that we do on a daily basis available through software. So if we move forward and we think, okay, we've been through digital transformation and we've been through COVID, what you'll see is that we've learned some lessons, and there are some things that we have to do differently now. And I think that this has been something that we've talked about for a long time. I think the digital transformation failures were kind of the initial failing point that we started to see, the initial realization that we had to think about software development in a fundamentally different way. We just came through a massive forcing function, something that's really dramatically different. And that was COVID. COVID was a forcing function. It changed things dramatically. Well, what changed? Well, at a minimum, we all started to change our work patterns, and we changed them very dramatically. We started to work from home. All of a sudden, everybody that was used to a working style where they were co-located with their coworkers were not co-located anymore. They were in different offices. What does that mean? Well, we started to use things like Zoom. We started to use things like WebEx more effectively. All of these different types of remote worker tools came to the forefront. But from a process perspective, things just broke. So when we surveyed the market, around April of 2020, kind of the worst point of what was going on with COVID, what we really discovered was a lot of stuff broke. We were getting it through our inquiries, but the data showed that 66% of organizations had broken processes. The file folder wasn't being passed. The people who were talking over the cubicle walls couldn't do it any longer. The mailroom wasn't being monitored, and you had functions that were coming in that were being supported by external pieces of paper. Nobody was in the mailroom. So what was happening was organizations were not serving their customers. Organizations were not able to recognize revenue. These were huge issues. And suddenly they realized we have to respond incredibly quickly to keep our business running. So the organizations that were more automated, the organizations that had already embraced no-code development patterns, that already were thinking about process automation in these terms, were able to respond very quickly. You could bring an application up very quickly. You could digitize a form very quickly. You could take a process that used to require a manual step in the middle of it and digitize that in days, in hours, as opposed to weeks or months. Where did we see this in our personal lives as consumers? Well, COVID tracking applications, loan applications that businesses had to make for banks, unemployment type applications, all of these things all of a sudden started being built with low code and no code. These were things that were traditional applications. There wasn't 6 months to bring in a systems integrator and respond to this challenge. You had days, you had maybe a week. So we saw this massive move towards automation and a real validation of no code and low code as a first-class citizen in the development environment. We moved towards these foundations that were fundamentally more adaptable. At the beginning, I mentioned adaptable being incredibly important. Firms were relying on software if it was the old style. Here in the U.S. where I happen to live, we saw unemployment systems topple over. They were looking for COBOL programs. We saw organizations that were looking for driving increased interactions through paper because their systems couldn't handle it at a time when people didn't want to touch paper. So the adaptable systems that were out there began to come online. They happened very quickly. We saw cloud platforms, really accelerate once again. And then this embracing of low code platforms and then what we call digital process automation.